You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and now it's time for the Paranormal Peep Show.
Hi folks, you're listening to the Paranormal Peep Show with myself, Andy Chaplin and Neil Ward. Some of you might be watching as well. Neil, how's things?
Fine, thank you very much for asking. I'm actually just getting over a cold, so I'm actually a lot finer than I was about a week ago, which was feeling pretty bad.
Okay.
But I've just done a talk for Dorset Earth Mysteries, and I did a talk called Hominids and Humanoids, which is the first time I gave that talk an outing. So it was a prototype kind of talk, seeing how it would go. So I was talking about basically Sasquatch, Bigfoot, that type of thing. Covered a lot on the Patty that happened in Northern California in 1967, and spoke about the Minnesota Iceman, which was an alleged shot Bigfoot by this guy that used to take it around county fairs and things in a freezer. And then in part two of the talk, I went on to talk about humanoid encounters. And this is why our guest is a very helpful person in that respect, because he's got lots of encounters with humanoids in his.
What would you classify as a humanoid?
Well, generally, my understanding of it is something that's got two arms, two legs, and a head, but whatever is in between is anybody's guess. You know, whether it's got three eyes, two mouths, no mouth, one ear, or anything like that.
So technically, a grey could be a humanoid.
A grey could be humanoid. That's right. It would fit that kind of definition. But you can go through the whole thing. And so I was doing in the second part of my talk was covering variations of humanoid encounters, and that, like the lady that had the UFO encounter in Staffordshire. Jesse
Rustenberg.
Thank you, Ben. Ben is joining us as well. Ben Emlyn-Jones. Thanks for joining us, Ben. So yeah, Ben's my backup when my mind goes blank.
So it's a very incredible case, that. Yeah, it's funny you should mention. I didn't know you were going to do that talk, Neil. Funny enough, I've just literally written an article about the Minnesota Iceman on Paranormal Voice, which is my main news blog. Fascinating case because literally, I mean, the display began, I think, in the late 60s, and then Bernard Hovmans and Ivan T. Sanderson did an article about it, and it actually gained some publicity. And the next thing you know, government officials came along and confiscated the body, and they said they needed to examine it for a few days. When it came back, it was just a latex simile onto the original body. And why would, I mean, we don't have to talk about this tonight, I'm sure we don't have time, but, you know, this idea of concealment of evidence is a staple of ufology.
Yeah.
But why would the government not want us to know that Bigfoot exists?
It's the classic "nothing to see here," folks.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lloyd Pye, the guy that was the Star Child's guy, I don't know what you call him, protagonist, keeper at the time. He was very much into the Bigfoot as well. I mean, it's a lot of the information I got for that talk came from his books, Everything You Know Is Wrong. He died in 2013, but he said he actually saw the Minnesota Iceman as a kid when Frank Hansen, the original owner or keeper of it, should I say, because the actual owner was supposedly a Hollywood millionaire, and James Stewart was reputed to be the guy that actually physically owned it, supposedly.
Jim Stewart.
Well, yeah, I mean, Pop Rubin, that's the rumor. Rumor control has it that James Stewart was the guy that financed it in some way. But Frank Hansen said he wasn't the owner, he was the keeper, although, you know, depends on which story you read. But Lloyd Pye basically said that he saw it in a carnival or in a shopping mall or something like that, in a freezer. And he said, you know, you paid your money, you went in and you looked at it right up close and you could see blood leaking from wounds, eyes popped out. You could see real fur frozen in the ice that was there. He said that was a living being once at one point. You know, there's no way that was faked. And also in the report written by the two scientists, Sanderson and the other guy, the Belgian guy, is that one of the things they noticed is that the fur on it in certain parts was, if you think of like a stripy cat's tail, was striped, so you'd get sort of a patterning on some of the fur. Now, if you're going to fake that, that would be a really difficult thing to fake, striped fur on a creature, and putting all the individual hairs in with a needle into some sort of wax body or something like that, and then repeat that process, and you've got thousands of hairs in one area, and then you go to the next area, which is going to be a dark fur, and then back to the lighter fur again.
Did anyone ever take a photo of the so-called alleged real one?
Well, yeah, there have been photographs and sketches made. What happened, the initial guys that investigated it over a 3-day period, when it was being put in for the winter, basically, in a cold storage unit, they were leaning over the glass to try and get a close look. And as he leaned over the glass collapsed slightly under and cracked. They could smell rotten flesh coming through the glass, which proved to them that it was a corpse of something, you know.
Where can people find the video for your talk, Neil?
I haven't actually videoed it yet. I did the presentation.
Okay.
I will probably be doing a presentation of it maybe in June, and I'll video it again. And this will be a second presentation of it, so it'll be a bit more refined, I suppose, and a bit more practiced. But once that's videoed, I'll certainly upload it to YouTube by the end of June, I'd like to think. So yeah, certainly, I'll let you know once that's done. It's really interesting case, is the Minnesota Iceman. Right, I think it's time we bring our guest on. Thank you for waiting in the wings. We'd like to welcome once more to the Paranormal Peep Show, Preston Dennett, joining us from California. Hello, Preston. Welcome once again to the Paranormal Peep Show.
Hey, Neil. Thanks for having me on. Hi, Ben.
Thank you for joining us. So, how are you keeping, first of all, Preston? Did you have a good holiday, Christmas and everything?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the holidays are always fun. It's always nice when they're over, too. Yeah.
Now, we've been looking lots of things stateside, with lots of things like, we've been here. I mean, we've had them in the UK, but then they seem to hot up over the US as well, with all these drones flying around the skies and things. And I know that we did have drones appearing here in US bases prior to Christmas. They were lots of drones mysteriously appearing in the UK and at UK airports. And then suddenly they started to appear in the United States as well. So we heard only recently, the claim is that it was the aviation authority was, I don't know, it gave the approval of these drones to be flown, apparently, even though it was quiet for the whole time and never said a dicky bird. And then suddenly, as soon as Trump gets in, there's an announcement. Oh yes, the drones, the aviation authority or civil aviation authority, they approved them, and they're just for research purposes or something. I mean, what's your opinion of that?
Yeah. Well, sure, certainly would have been nice if they had spoken up a little bit sooner, which is suspicious to me. But having studied all the reports, I honestly, having talked to people who I think are in a position to know the truth, people like James Goodall, an aviation historian, Dolly Safran, who is connected to the Department of Defense, and other people, I think they're covert military ops exclusively. I know people are describing all kinds of strange movements and orbs and so forth, but
would you look up? Would you suspect the purpose is or was?
Probably a couple of things I'm guessing here. Perhaps it is, searching for nuclear material, which was certainly one reason raised. But it feels kind of propaganda-ish, because here we have all these disclosure meetings going on, and this is when this comes up, all these drones, and the media goes absolutely crazy. I mean, it was a frenzy covering this, which is also unusual, because the media rarely touches UFO reports. So that also seemed a little bit odd to me. Only flying around at night, which is really not quite how UFOs generally behave in a wave of sightings.
Beginning of the stream or not?
Yeah, that's, I think, honestly, what this might be, a sort of dry run, a little practice.
See how people react.
False why the invasion.
Hey.
That
Ben, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, the anyone who's been following the whole drone situation, the announcement the other day by Christine Leavitt, is it Caroline Leavitt? What's her name? The press secretary. The announcement that the very, very brief announcement that she issued, which was Caroline Leavitt, yes, a very brief announcement that she meted, just saying an update on the New Jersey drones. After research and study, the drones are flying over New Jersey in large numbers, but authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and other reasons. Now, and some of them are hobbyists as well. Well, no doubt there are some hobbyists too, because everyone was doing a copycat thing. But the fact of the matter is that these were not authorized by the Federal Aviation Administration at all. We know that because journalists were writing to them and asking them about it. We also know that there was a massive reaction from various police forces, and there was anti-drone weapons deployed to various bases and other facilities such as nuclear power stations and things like this, and very sensitive areas. These anti-drone weapons didn't seem to work, incidentally, if indeed they were deployed. And even President Trump himself actually cancelled a trip to Bedminster, New Jersey, because of advice from his security team. And then they come out with this. This is baffling. It's confusing. It's disappointing considering this is the guy who signed the executive order to release the JFK files, or at least start the ball rolling in that direction. So something else is going on here. Either this is some kind of posturing at whoever's keeping this secret, or there's something that they're paving the ground for something else. And it could be, like you said, Andy and Preston mentioned Project Bluebeam. Now, I wouldn't put it past those driving towards greater authoritarianism in this world, that in order to justify some kind of state of emergency, they would say, well, all right, we'll hold our hands up. We'll admit it. Aliens are real. We've been lying to you. Sorry about this, but they're nasty aliens, and we need to come together as one, as Ronald Reagan said. Put our differences aside. We're faced from a threat beyond this earth. So temporary, of course. And then the power we've taken from the people, we will return to the people. We promise you. So I wouldn't put it past them to try something like that if they were desperate. The last card, Carol Rosen called it, didn't she?
Yeah,
Last card.
It went, what was it? It went rogue states, then terrorist organizations, then Asteroid has popped up recently.
Yeah, we just had that one, haven't we?
Yeah, the paper's all about this asteroid, and now we've got Brian Cox, kind of like, for those who don't know, in America, he's kind of like quite a famous BBC presenter, astronomer, very science. He's the go-to science guy for anything space, basically, mainstream. And he's talking about, the 1 in 43 chance or something like that about Earth being struck by an asteroid. Where's all this suddenly coming from? And as you say, Ben, the last card is the alien card, but it feels like they're laying these cards really, really quickly, aren't they? Because they've got the COVID card, and now they've got the asteroid card, and now they've got the possible blue beam card. It's like, why is it that all of these things are happening in the past 5 years or so? It's
a rush, isn't it?
It's very.
It does seem very carefully controlled, this whole process, very intentional. FAA, I don't trust them when it comes to the UFO subject. I certainly don't trust our military or intelligence agencies. They always lie when it comes to UFOs, every single time.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, Preston, I mean, I know there's several pilots who've actually reported these things, both military and civil, who have suffered professionally considerably when they make a UFO report. And I mean, I think this taboo is lifting somewhat, but especially with Callahan's speech in the Washington D.C. press conference. But still, it's I'm sure a lot of pilots are tempted just to keep their mouth shut.
Yeah, I'd still say that's the rule more than the exception. Though times are changing. I mean, these recent congressional hearings, I don't call disclosure by any means. I think really the best result from them has been the fact that many new people are being brought into the field. Interest in the subject is skyrocketing. It is going mainstream. It's adding a legitimacy to it that it's never enjoyed before, which is all good news. I think it steps towards disclosure.
Yeah,
but until our government admits to the truth of Roswell, say, or the Capitol flyover, or the incident at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967 in Montana, where they shut down our nuclear missiles. Get to the truth of that, and then we can talk.
Yeah,
So that
the
I
red
don't
line.
trust them.
That'd be
If
the
you guys come across, the really weird one, a supposed video about, this flight that went missing, flight M370.
yeah.
Have you come across the video where allegedly there's 3 orbs flying around it and then the plane just disappears?
That's Ashton Forbes who's been studying that. Yeah,
Right.
he's on YouTube.
We just cut
Yeah.
off my radar, pardon the pun, recently. What's your guys' thoughts on that? Because I've seen the videos and I don't know. The problem we've got is that AI is so sophisticated. We could be looking at AI, and this applies to everything: Bigfoot, ghosts, UFOs, reptilians, the whole lot. There are elements that could be AI.
Who was filming the camera then to capture the MH50 suit?
Well, Ashton talks. I can answer that. Ashton. So Ashton mentions there were two videos. One's from a satellite, the space-based infrared satellite, and another is from a drone.
Okay.
And so, although he says, but as you said, Andy, you can never, unfortunately, visual evidence no longer carries the weight that it used to, because what can't be faked these days. And indeed, there's many people claiming these were faked. It was what long ago, 2014, technically would have been possible, although Ashton disputes this. And there's this back and forth between him and other people. Ashton's quite good at defending his position. That I'm not an expert in this field, but it's a fascinating case. Yeah.
What are genuine experiences or contactees going to do if, say, there's a rare occasion where they see a physical anomaly, they see a UFO, they see, a grey or Nordic or whatever, and they take a photo of it and they release it, and then immediately everyone says it's AI. I mean, what can be done in that situation? If it's a genuine photo, how are we ever going to know? How are we ever going to know?
You've put out lots of videos, Preston, of people having humanoid encounters, and there was one of the guy that I think he was in Spain, and he was the doctor, and he was looking for rocks. I think he wanted to study a bit of geology on his weekend off, and I think he was heading round past Gibraltar when he saw this, what he initially thought was a monkey running across in front of him when he was on his motorbike, and it kept his arms flat, and it jumped into a hedge. And the guy happened to have his camera with him, and he took a photograph of the alleged UFO, which was like a green shaped, green UFO with kind of wings on it. And it had like, this is the weird thing, it had like a shutter door. If you imagine like a store in the UK in any high street, and when they bring down the shutters at night to lock up, it had a door like that, like a slatted kind of shutter thing, which I thought was a really weird thing to have on a flying saucer. But this was taken in about 1960 something, 68, 67, on his slide film. I was a bit suspicious of that photograph, wondering myself if it was a model. But it's a shame he didn't get a picture of the creature that supposedly led him to it. But I mean, one of the things I do find all these accounts really interesting, these people having these accounts. But as one of the guys said to me when I did my talk recently, why don't people take photographs? Everyone's got a cell phone in their pocket these days. Why don't people just take a photograph of their UFO or the alien being, whatever? But my answer to that is that initially they're so gobsmacked by the experience that they don't actually come to their senses of think rational stuff. Oh, I better take a picture. Sometimes some people do, but other times they're just caught like a deer in the headlights. What do you think to that, Preston?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I personally had a very close-up UFO sighting with a camera around my neck, and it could not look away. Really did not even think of it. There are a number of cases out there with photographic evidence where people have attempted to take photographs and they don't come out. In the Hudson Valley UFO wave in upstate New York, 1980s, early 1990s, a number of people tried to take photographs, and some did come out, but most did not. I know of several cases like this. There was one case that I investigated personally on Catalina Island. This is off the coast of Southern California.
Oh, there.
1986, thereabouts, 84. There were 11 people there, and 4 of them had cameras. They were photographers. more of them actually, but not one of their cameras would actually work.
Oh my God.
So there was something else going on there. There are a few photographic cases of ETs that I do find very intriguing, particularly the one of Jeff Greenhaw, who is a police officer called to a UFO sighting by another lady, saw this metallic figure
Oh yeah.
leaping down the road. He managed to capture 4 Polaroid photographs. I think this was in Arkansas.
I know that one. Can I ask Preston? Could I ask that when you were in this situation, this is something that's never happened to me. I mean, I know people like yourself. I've known this. There's a lady I know very well who's had a very close encounter with a large object. Do you think this was something that the object is because of the influence of the object you didn't think to take a photograph, or you think it's just a natural human reaction when confronted with something out of this world? Or is there another explanation? It's not
For me,
a question.
I really don't think it was an outside influence. It was just such a surprise. Even though I'd actually gone there, expecting to see a UFO because I was being brought there by a contactee who essentially was setting this up. But I do know of cases. There was a gentleman who had a camera on his passenger seat and kept reaching for it, but felt like he was being influenced not to pick it up, and tried several times. Another case in, I think it was Italy, involving a gentleman and a whole bunch of children, and 2 of them had crept off into the forest just to admire the scenery, saw a humanoid quite close up, and he tried to pick up his camera, but it became, he says, unbelievably heavy. Could not move it. His arms felt slightly paralyzed. That is, I think, is another case where they are influencing a person, perhaps.
Yeah, this is. So I was going to say that this is essentially the phenomenon itself is actually evading just evidence capture by
There seem to
influencing
be
people.
quite camera shy often, but
Yeah, the fact they can stop cameras from working, and I know they do sometimes. Or some people suddenly find that their mobile phone battery's gone flat or something. It's just gone flat.
I have to say my favorite footage ever is the Kumburgaz turkey footage from 2008-9. It's clearly a display. Clearly, they wanted to be filmed.
But that sounds contradictory, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds contradictory, but we may well be dealing, of course, with many different species who have many different agendas.
On a kind of like off on a slight tangent from that, Ben. It's not just species. It's kind of like sections within I'm going to use the term woo woo. So there's cross correlations between the UFO world and the ghost world, for instance. So when people are out doing ghost hunts, whatever ghosts might be, sometimes their equipment fails, sometimes their batteries get drained, sometimes they take photos that don't come out. And interestingly, sometimes there's this phenomena where they see the ghost, and even if they've got a camera, again, they don't think to take a photo of the ghost. And the influence thing is interesting as well, because you probably aware there's some kind of like haunted roads where there's a lot of accidents, and some people report having feelings of being influenced, like I've felt the compulsion to drive into a ditch. I don't know if you've come across that, but I've been viewing some videos recently about different stories and things of a negative nature, let's say, where there's kind of like influences, whether it's demonic or kind of negative. Again, have you guys come across kind of cross correlations between the UFO world and the ghost world in that sense?
I'll let Preston go first.
Yeah, there are some really interesting commonalities, certainly, but weird bleed-throughs as well. Not at all unusual for a person to have an intense onboard encounter, then come back and have poltergeist type activity. But
yeah, this is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and went the other way once. I interviewed these 2 ladies who had a very intense, what I think was a demonic haunting, part Van Nuys, California, and had a UFO sighting very close up immediately following, which they feel very much was connected in some way. Hard to say.
Are they the same thing? I mean, this is what we really need to ask. Are these energies, are they, or at least are they coming from a same dimension or a similar dimension, or using some kind of portal that are the same? So, for instance, if somebody opens a paranormal type, ghost type portal, are there aliens thinking, oh, we can use that? Or the other way around, if somebody's seeing UFOs and, some kind of portal is open with that, some kind of poltergeist or demonic entity thinks, oh, we can use that. I wonder what's really going on with that.
Yeah, I don't have any evidence of that. I'm of the school of thought that these are separate
Type of thing.
phenomena.
Mm.
I think a Bigfoot is a Bigfoot, even though there are cases where, UFOs and Bigfoot are seen at the same time.
Yeah, I've heard this.
Experience
Presque Isle. Keep them little six.
series and stuff. I don't think those are the same thing as ETs. I know there are researchers who conflate this all together. It's a phenomenon that wears different masks and manifesting according to your belief system. I don't find that persuasive for a number of reasons. But yeah, really interesting.
I'm going to press you on that, actually, Preston. What are the reasons? Because I want to delve into this a little bit.
Well, when it comes to, say, someone has a very intense onboard experience, like I mentioned, and comes back, it's almost the rule rather than the exception that they'll experience a wide variety of paranormal events.
Mm.
And I really dug deep into this because it's very common. Someone will start having out-of-body experiences, perhaps, or precognition, or have a poltergeist outbreak in their home. I think what's going on here, they'll experience mediumship or psychic reading, healings. Their psychic abilities have been, to some extent, I think, ignited, woken up, strengthened as a result of their encounter. This does appear to be one of the ET agendas, for lack of a better word, missions, goals, is to wake us up to our own abilities.
Mm.
This runs up a lot. I mean, I interviewed one lady at an encounter in Mount Rainier, Washington, in her apartment, with a little silver suited entity to work that morning, and first blew out her computer and copier machine, then the fax machine. Can't be a coincidence. Her bioelectric field was somehow affecting all these instruments. I say that because this turns up over and over. Contactees blowing out watches and light bulbs and fuzzing up TVs and radios. So I think what we're looking at here is that having contact, and this can come from a near-death experience even, or seeing a ghost, it wakes you up to some degree, can sort of open the doorway for other activity.
Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, Preston, you're saying that the phenomena are separate, but what unifies them is that the person experiencing them has opened themselves up to some gateway where this is possible in their life.
I think it's ultimately about our own consciousness. I don't think it's an external portal or anything like that. But this is my assessment, because this is a really puzzling aspect. A lot of researchers absolutely disregard. They're very nuts and bolts, don't want to talk about spiritual, paranormal aspects of this, which I think is a mistake, because they are clearly connected.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean,
One of the things that intrigues me in a lot of the accounts is, and we can sort of quote a few cases, like there's the Fowler Gill case where in Papua New Guinea, I think it was in 1950, what was it, 53, something like that?
late 50s, I think. But
Late
I know the
50s,
case you mean, yeah.
57, yeah. In this, like a church off the coast of Papua New Guinea, they saw this flying saucer for about 3 days running, kept appearing, but they noticed there was people coming out on the surface of this UFO. They appear to be working on it in some way, maintaining it or checking it or repairing it and things like that. And Father Gill and his friends basically waved the people, the beings on board, and they would wave back. And I think they were trying to encourage them to land because the landing legs were up, but it never actually landed, according to the records. But in a lot of cases, people have encountered UFOs, and there's always seemed to be people, beings, aliens, ETs, whatever, that are either walking around the UFO or repairing one end of it, or like maintaining it in some way. And I'm thinking, now, if we got our own aircraft, for instance, that are landing, they take off, do a mission, they land. or they have to make an emergency landing or something, then you don't see the pilots getting out and walking around trying to repair their own craft. It's normally done by engineers on the ground or something. I just find that bizarre that these people are traveling these machines, but they seem to be unreliable. That they've got to repair them all the time, but they always have to repair them in front of witnesses. Now, I think that's a bit of a correlation of something going on there. And my own theory is that they want to be seen, these beings, so they're standing outside the craft, but they don't want to appear to be threatening to whoever's going to observe them. So if they can appear to be offhandish, oh, we're not really interested in you, we've got things to do here, we're going to fiddle with our machinery, but you can watch us do it type of thing. Therefore, we're posing no threat because we're not interested in you. Then we might engage in conversation with you. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from so-and-so, and tomorrow I'm going to so-and-so. As in the case of these phantom airships, a lot of people encounter people doing that sort of thing. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Preston, with people supposedly repairing their craft?
Now, I've certainly looked into those types of cases. It's a pretty rare category. And I think what we're honestly have to, consider is we're speculating here that they're repairing these craft. We don't know. So there could be a number of things going on here, whatever they're doing. I mean, until we know, we don't know. But yeah, quite a few cases of them wandering around on top of their craft, walking around it, fiddling with it. Absolutely. We see that. Good number of cases where they ignore the witnesses completely. Others will look right at you or walk up towards you. Many, many, many cases where they come down, land, walk up to the witness, walk right back into their craft. It's odd. I mean, like, what is the purpose of that other than to sort of announce their presence? Ultimately, I've come to that conclusion that is one of the purposes that they're here, is simply announcing their presence. They're so... I wrote a whole book on schoolyard UFO encounters. They hover over schools. I got 100 cases, very low level sightings, daytime usually, but landing in about 1/3 of the cases. And usually pretty brief. They get out, walk around their craft a little bit, might wave, might even walk up to the students, communicate briefly, but right back into the craft they go. So it does appear that ETs are putting on what amounts to a publicity campaign. Very vigorous.
Yeah, because the other sort of analogy I give is that, like, for instance, if someone moves to a neighborhood and they want to go and introduce themselves to the neighbors, I mean, here in the UK, it always used to be, oh, I'll pop round to borrow a bowl of sugar, and that way I'll introduce myself. Now, the purpose is that they don't really want a bowl of sugar, but they'll take a bowl or something, and they're knocking on the door. Oh, hello, I'm your new next door neighbor. My name's Mike. Is it possible I can borrow a bowl of sugar, please? I'm just out and I've only just moved in, and then it engages in a conversation. And so you're turning up and you're not looking weird by standing there with nothing. Hello, I'm your neighbor, and it looks like you've got some sort of purpose, and it looks like you're friendly. It looks like you're going to be there temporarily, and so you engage in a conversation, and it's a non-threatening social interaction, and you go away with a bowl of sugar, and you probably don't even need it at all. But that way you've established a social kind of etiquette of saying hello to your neighbor in a very friendly way. And I wonder if these people repairing their craft are essentially doing the same thing. They're borrowing a bowl of sugar in a sort of alien sense or something.
It could be. I mean, can I ask Preston, actually? Because, I mean, what's pretty clear is that these encounters, you call them UTs. Is that ultra-terrestrial? Is that something else?
I've heard the term. I'm not a fan of it.
John Kill you.
What is it? What do you mean by UTs?
That's not a term I generally use, and I have the same question. What exactly is that supposed to mean?
Sure, and they came from another dimension rather than from planets and stars and things.
Yeah, but don't we all? I mean, isn't every entity in existence interdimensional to some degree?
Yeah,
And we all have interdimensional aspects. We come from source, the other side, what have you.
Well, but that goes into the realm of, I suppose, psychical research, the soul, consciousness, and things like that. But yeah, I mean, that's interesting. That's an interesting point.
We give these people all kinds of different labels. We love labels and names. It helps us to understand things. I think the extraterrestrial, I'll call it a hypothesis, but I think it's pretty well established. Because can possibly be alone in this universe. That makes zero sense. And the evidence is overwhelming with all of these humanoid reports associated with metallic craft with portholes, leaving landing traces, pulling people on board, giving them implants, healing them, and so on. Certainly fits the explanation of extraterrestrial very neatly. Far better, I think, than any other explanation we have. People will come, oh, time travelers from the future. Well, I looked into that and I couldn't find enough cases, I think, to really build a convincing argument that that's who they are.
That's dubious, yeah.
Yeah, interdimensional. Again, I think the one that really bothers me the most is the argument that's put forth by Jacques Vallée and John Keel and Jerome Clark, Lauren Coleman, and others, that this is a phenomena that is wearing different masks and is not ETs at all. But the argument to support this is honestly very speculative and based on no actual evidence to support it. So, I know that there are commonalities between little fairy folk and little people in all the different cultures. I looked deeply into that, and I think those are actually real entities, which we would probably call more appropriately interdimensional, or perhaps crypto-terrestrials. That's another term I've heard.
That's quite a cool one.
But I mean, one thing's for certain, there's a lot of variety. I mean, for example, they take many different forms, and they seem to exhibit a wide variety of behaviour. I mean, you just mentioned that sometimes they'll hide from you, sometimes they'll come at the witness, and they'll approach the witness. And as Neil said, sometimes they'll even wave to you, which is a very human gesture. I mean,
their behaviour pretty much falls under the same umbrella as human behaviour. I will say it's quite a bit more benevolent what we do to each other.
I mean, yeah, the concept of when it comes to stranger interaction, I mean, it goes from, like, say, benevolent. Other people, it appears that some people have very unpleasant experiences with these beings. The majority appear to be almost like they're studying us. They're actually examining us. That seems to be the prevailing feel you get off these things. There's people are subjected to various medical examinations. There's sometimes they'll like literally sit you down and talk to you. Usually it's a telepathic communication, but they'll sometimes sit you down and have long conversations with you. And sometimes they issue warnings and advice and things like that. It's
a really set pattern when someone's taken on board. Yes, the most common experience people will report is being physically examined. I will say healing is a big part of this onboard experience, because I've got cases from pretty much every major researcher out there. Multiple cases of this. But yeah, people are physically examined, sometimes healed. And if you're not having a complete negative reaction, this is why I think some people say, oh, this was not a good experience for me. It felt negative because it was very, very scary for them.
It wouldn't a wild animal that's captured by a vet and then the vet will treat them in some way. I mean, for example, I saw a penguin being with a piece of wire wrapped around it, and the vet captured it. And the penguin was obviously terrified because this is going to come and caught it in a net. But then the vet then cut the wire off the penguin and put some ointment and dressing on the wound around its neck, and then let it go. And then the penguin hopped away very happily, obviously delighted that this horrible wire had been taken from his body.
Then he told all his penguin friends.
Exactly. The experience must be like, because obviously when we interact between species, there's this. I mean, we can interact between species. You've got a dog. Actually, you've got a dog in the background there. You have a relationship with that dog. It's a non-human animal, and you can have very close relationships with dogs and some other pets as well. But
I'm glad you brought that up, because we have all kinds of life on this planet, and people are like, I wonder what it would be like to interact with an ET. Well, you should visit dolphins and have an interaction with them. They're very intelligent. Dogs as well. You realize that animals are quite sentient.
There's a lady called Denise Herzing who's currently trying to decode the dolphin's language. Oh, there's a pussycat. Yes, exactly.
That's little Jessie.
Yeah, but you see, this is I suppose, like, when you're dealing with an ET intelligence, this is one of my big critics of SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Not only are they looking for something millions of miles away, which they could find flying a few dozen feet above our heads, which seems a little bit strange, but they make a lot of assumptions about what these beings would be like. I mean, Carl Sagan designed these plaques with a man holding his hand up like that. Now, that's a sign of greeting universally across humanity. You could go into the jungle of New Guinea and meet with somebody who's had no contact with the outside world at all, and you could do that, and they'd understand it. They'd understand what that meant. But we're dealing with something more exotic than just someone in a jungle in New Guinea. How do we know that that might not mean we're coming for your grannies?
Well, I think, like Neil said, these are humanoids we're dealing with almost exclusively. If you go through the vast literature on this subject, there are only a very, very few, a statistically insignificant number of cases that are non-humanoid, sort of blob-like beings, or something that's not bipedal, with a head and arms and so forth. And they are doing exactly that sort of thing, making gestures to people. And people who have direct communication with these guys will often get a message somewhere along the lines of, we share a common heritage, we share a common ancestry, we are you, you are us, we are one. The fact that some of these guys actually do look pretty much exactly like us, I think raises really serious implications. What is our relationship to them? It's clearly much closer than we might think. So I'm hoping that, yeah, we're probably very much related to these guys.
If they've been visited, this is an interaction which is perennial in the human experience. I mean, it can be traced back to prehistoric times, basically. It didn't begin with Betty and Barney Hill or with Kenneth Arnold. It was much, much older than that. And indeed, the idea of panspermia and the idea that the universe itself has a biosphere, of which the Earth is just one part, rather than the Earth being this kind of oasis in this huge cosmic desert, makes much more sense to me, in which case we would expect some kind of genetic link, because the DNA therefore would not be confined to this Earth, and also we may be dealing with creatures that may have developed in a similar habitat to ourselves. Astronomers, even like very mainstream astronomers, are discovering Earth-like planets. If they have an environment which is similar to our own, maybe there's a parallel evolution at work here. There's this.
I agree. I mean, you talk about SETI looking outwards for something that is actually happening right next to them.
I've got an entire presentation.
Scientists are refusing to even ignore the evidence. And if you cannot open your mind enough to look at the evidence before making a decision about it, what kind of a scientist are you?
Yeah.
And factors are stuck thousands upon thousands of humanoid reports. This means something that we have to figure out.
I don't want to do a great big plug, right? But I'm speaking at the Birmingham UFO group the first Thursday next month, and I'm doing a talk on this very subject. Sorry. Yeah, it's in March, yeah, whenever this goes to air. But I mean, it may have already passed, but I'll try and video it. But you are literally having this conundrum between SETI and ufology. I'm going to cover this in great detail because it is extraordinary.
And the mainstream scientists can't answer the fact that why are humans the only species not adapted to this planet? All animals don't wear clothes unless humans put clothes on animals, but we cannot survive outside. We'll get hypothermia and die. We're hairless monkeys, basically. So, where do we really come from? Where does our DNA and genetics really come from? Are we a test tube, species created by another species?
There's a book by Ellis Silver called "Humans Are Not from Earth." It's worth checking out. He makes some of these interesting points.
If we're descended from the ape family, why is our skin more like a pig's skin?
Yeah.
Things like that. Why do we have why does our nose point downwards? Why are we not arboreal? Why do we have flat feet? We walk upright. I mean,
apparently our sleep pattern is more akin to being in tune with Mars than it is with our own moon.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because Mars, in the distant past, did have a more Earth-like environment.
Yeah, and I know several contactees were basically told that in the far, far, far past did inhabit Mars. Dolly Safran, who I wrote a whole book about, Symmetry, was told that by the ETs. And I have other cases, same thing. That definitely makes you wonder.
Yeah, from what I understand, and this is my kind of like understanding of it, that humans originally started off on Mars for whatever reason, whether it was climate or whether it was war, I don't know, but they had to get out of there, and the next nearest planet to head to that was viable was Earth. Who knows?
But certainly, if Mars, I mean, this is why people keep finding. I mean, in the visual record captured by NASA and other space agencies, what strange structures, objects on Mars that looks like artificial.
Yeah, yeah, the square I
Yeah.
came across that recently.
Yeah, that's been around for years. I remember seeing it in a book about 15 years ago.
Oh, okay. Right.
I mean, if there was a different environment in the distant past in Mars, an intelligent animal species may well have evolved capable of constructing objects. So something obviously went badly wrong with the Martian environment, as you just said. We had to get out. But
And there's no going back either. It's no magnetic field. Sorry, Elon Musk. I don't think we're gonna make it there and survive.
yeah, it's but it's annoying that the mainstream academics so reject this theory. They won't even look at it. They call people like Richard Hoagland crazy, and they just won't even discuss it.
It's crazy thinking they can actually go to Mars and set up habitual zones and things like that under all that intense radiation.
It's a
Very similar
journey.
you know.
3 years in space. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, if there's an emergency, how they're going to get back? They're going to need food. Then they're going to need oxygen. I mean, can you imagine the amount of food needed for a 3-year journey, let alone spending the rest of your life on Mars? And when you get there, what was that film? I think that Matt Damon
The
film.
Martian.
Yeah, basically, when you get there, there's nothing. The only way you're going to survive is what you bring with you. And I'm sorry, I do not trust current human technology with what we've got. It's just, unless we send Keir Starmer, if we a one-way ticket for him would be fantastic. And
I was thinking we'd have a big crowd. I'd be willing to crowdfund that. Do you know our colleague Jarrell Watt would vehemently disagree with us on this, but I mean he's not here to talk about it. But he has a.
What does he say? He thinks it's possible that
He thinks, yeah, he's very keen on the idea of a mission to Mars and indeed Martian colonies and stuff. But
Radiation. Well, look it up. There's no magnetic field. It's not going to work.
I want to ask a bit more because Preston brought this up about the hearings. No, I've been following the hearings, UFO hearings in the United States very closely. There have been several equivalents in Brazil, and maybe I don't know if there's any other countries. But to me, it is encouraging, like you said earlier. And I don't want to put a dampener on it, but from what I've seen so far, all we've basically seen is we've seen the legislature of a nation, that is the official government, basically asking or petitioning or just picking the brains of various witnesses on, about something that lies within what Richard Dolan calls the national security state or the breakaway civilization. People who have knowledge about what's going on behind that iron curtain, but the legislature has no real authority over what goes on in there. So as much as I'm glad to see President Trump sign an executive order to declassify the JFK files, and as Chuck Schumer says, now do UFOs. But and it's clearly that there's an intent there within the executive of this new administration. But how likely is it to be successful, do you think? How much authority does Trump or Nancy Mace or Tim Burchett or any of these people really have over this? When you consider that, Matt Gates and Anna Paulina Luna, they were turned away from a military base. They were told you can't come in here. And it's just, don't tell us that. We are your government. You can't keep us out of here. And they say, yes, we can.
Well, that's the bad question, isn't it? I don't know that our president is the one who's running the country, not truly, or the legislative branch, or the judicial branch, or any of them. Because if you trace the cover-up, who's the folks behind it? It's the highest levels of the military, non-elected officials. And even beyond that, because you can't give a freedom of information request to a private corporation.
Yeah, it's a military-industrial complex.
Yeah. These are the folks behind the cover-up. One percenters to some degree, corporations, energy industry, pharmaceutical industry, banking and insurance industries. I think these are the ones probably who have some influence on all of this? Absolutely. It's the intelligence agencies, Pentagon, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, so forth, are in the know, who are controlling this, but I think are probably being used by the ultra rich, the cabal, so to speak, for lack of a better word.
I was going to say, so far as the banking industry goes, I mean, we've all heard this phrase, billions owed, countries, UK, for instance, 22 billion pound black hole debt, but nobody ever asks, certainly in the mainstream, who is the money owed to? When we talk about countries in debt, and we talk about the huge trillion or quadrillion debts, who is it owed to? And people say, oh, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Well, who owns that then? That nobody asks, well, who owns that? And when you get back to it, exactly as you said, Preston, what we're talking about is this cabal, this elite group of banking families running the whole show.
David Rothkopf wrote a book called Superclass, which is very interesting. It's an interesting read because it talks about that there is literally a kind of breakaway civilization. He puts it in the world of finance and industry, things like that. But of course, it involves technology. It involves study of secret science and things like this, which he doesn't bring up in his book, but it's still relevant, I think. But I don't want to sound defeatist here because I don't believe it's a lost cause. And clearly, there is a will now. I mean, there's more of a will within the executive and legislature in the United States to address this point than I've ever seen before.
I mean, the legislative branch does have the authority to oversight spending in the intelligence agencies. I think
they're exerting their muscles in a way that past administrations didn't. And so I'm not defeatist about this, but it is. People sometimes have this idea that they call the president of the United States the most powerful man in the world. Actually, he's not. His power is very limited, not just by the US Constitution itself, but also by this reality that you and Andy and Preston have just described. But I mean, as I said, I'm not a pessimist here. I do believe things can come out of left field, and where there's a will, there's a way. And now, finally, at least we have a will. So
I'd like a sitting head of state to just say flat out, UFOs are real. We've been visited. That hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, we've had one say that they're not real. That is, well, we've had one say doesn't know, which is Bill Clinton. He talked about Ryan from Belfast to me, and he asked me, is there in 1947 did the aliens crash at Roswell? I don't know, and I want them to tell me. Well,
although there was that Canadian Air Force guy who basically said that they are real. I forgot.
Well, the first was Paul Hellier.
Paul Hellier. Now
he was retired at that time. I spoke to Berkeley face to face. A great guy. Not too long before he passed on. I have to give kudos to him. That took a lot of courage to put your reputation on the line. He was retired.
So not
he was the defense minister in the 60s, I think. And something that we heard about him. He was like 97 or something.
Yeah, what was done by him? He was really a man with huge energy because at the age of 95, he started doing tours and he was writing a book. I don't know if he managed to finish it, but you know what?
Good.
Oh, good. Hopefully we see it published. But what's really weird, Preston, is that when he died, there were obituaries that were written about him, including one which I wrote. But the Canadian media, the mainstream media in Canada, was completely silent, which is weird considering this guy he's one of the most senior statesmen in the entire country. He was the longest served members of the King's Council, which is the senior house of the Canadian Parliament. He was actually the longest sitting member of the King's Council. Yet there was no obituary to him in the mainstream Canadian media at all.
How weird!
He died silently and forgotten by everyone except. Silence speaks for you.
The absence of things said sometimes speaks louder than words. I'm also very suspicious about how Congress has yet to interview a contactee or talk about humanoids really at all, that people are having direct contact. We'll talk about sightings.
Yeah.
Talk about, even crash retrievals and so-called extraterrestrial intelligence. No, non-human intelligence. All these euphemisms drive me absolutely crazy. UAP is a new one. But why? How has that changed the game at all?
Well, the reason that the term UAP is actually dates back to the Condign report, which was a British investigation in the 1980s. But the reason it's been adopted, and ironically, is for the very same reason the Robertson panel in 1952 adopted the term UFO, because they didn't want it. They didn't want to sound crazy by saying flying saucer. Unfortunately, we crazies culturally appropriated UFO. So now they have to come up with something new, and they chose UAP. And they'll have to think of something new. They'll eventually have to come up with something new, because, of course, will culturally appropriate UAP as well.
Right. I think we come to a culture appropriate point to take a break in the Paranormal Peep Show. So I think what we'll do here, we'll take a break. We won't be back in a few minutes. We'll be back in about half an hour, because we do have an interview with Michael Horn, who kindly spared some time with us last week to talk about the Billy Meier case and his experiences of prophecies and things like that. So take a look at that, and then we'll be back with you after that. Hi, welcome to a segment in the Paranormal Peep Show where we're joined by Andy and Ben and myself, but we also have a special guest hailing in from the United States, and that is Michael Horn. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Neil, Andy, Ben. Glad to be here.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Now, we've been looking at some of the material that you've been putting out over the last few years, and we know that you're associated with the very controversial, he has got a bit of a controversial history, and that's Billy Meier. And I remember Billy Meier as a kid seeing his pictures in paperback books and thinking, wow, these pictures look really impressive. And I saw it in a center spread of a weekend magazine once and thought this is intriguing. And then I lost contact with the whole thing. But you've plowed on and carried on becoming more interested and kind of worked with him. So how did you become involved in the Billy Meier contact case?
I walked into a bookstore in Los Angeles 46 years ago, saw the first photo book with these astounding UFO photos, knew I had to have it, bought the book, and everything unfolded from there. The next main event was that I got, through a circumstance of coincidence, the 1,800 pages of the first translations of what are now 45,000 pages of information from Meier's conversations with these people dating back to the 1940s. In the year 2000, I went to Switzerland to meet Meier for the first time. I made my first video documentary on it in 2004. I have 4 documentaries out. I've interviewed Meier. I've been to Switzerland 22 times. I've gotten the chance to speak to him all these times. I've tried to trick him on questions to see if it possibly could be a hoax. I've been an eyewitness 3 times to the craft from the people that he meets with, and 4 or 5 other sightings. And the UFO, in this case, it's singularly authentic through my 46 years of research. And the UFO part is probably the least important part. The extraterrestrials in this case are fully human. They have meeting with him since he's a 5-year-old boy. And right now, just to throw it in, the evolution of it, the information in this case far exceeds in importance what we see in the fantastic photos and films that nobody else has of that quality. But they began warning him as early as 1946 about things that would happen in our world pertaining to just about every country on Earth, political, environmental, geopolitical, scientific discoveries that he published up to 30 years before NASA. I'm kind of shotgunning it out because this is not, quote unquote, a UFO case. I'm not a ufologist, and we're not conspiratorial. This is simply something of such earth-shaking importance that most people have not ever heard about it. And those are reasons pertaining to the U.S. government and various secret services that do their best to try to discredit the case and all. Every skeptical challenge that I've been able to find, I was interrogated by a top-level American former intelligence officer who was a skeptic. After 8 months of 3 months with me, 5 months of his own research, came back and said, this is authentic. I'll take on any skeptics in your behalf. He did. U.S. astronauts have also authenticated it. So this is above the line in terms of, if you will, paranormal, conspiratorial, anything like that. So I hope that that's a kind of crunched version of what got me going.
I understand that Trump has an interest in Area 51 and might have been briefed on a few things. Do you think he's ever going to open the lid on it, or do you think or do you think he wants to, but has been told we can't do that?
You would want to know that basically our country, going back to the First World War, 1915, has known about craft from other worlds. The Area 51 development, they'll tell him what they want him to know. He'll reveal what he feels. It will be nothing of great importance. Even now, there are these hearings and people are revealing things. It's all a dog and pony show. It never goes anywhere. I know, because I discovered photos related to this Meier case that had never been seen before. A government committee here said, hey, send us those photos. We're really interested. I sent them to the government committee and they censored them. Our government is concealing. There is no threat. Right now, there's no threat from extraterrestrials, other beings. The threat is from the United States of America's military, Israel's military, and the machinations of various governmental and secret military powers around the world. We are at we've passed the point of any return for some time. We are now going to go into an extended period of grief. And it would have been avoidable if people had not tried to kill this man, Meier, 25 times, and instead published the findings that were there. So there's nothing of significance that will ever come from government committees.
Which of Billy's predictions are coming true right now as we speak?
Right now, the harassment of various countries, including Iran, by Trump, this material is in prophecies and predictions from 1946 and 47. 1946 and 7, Trump doing these things, very clearly outlined, crazy megalomaniacal president who will come to power after the new millennium. I mean, spelled out. There are eruptions of volcanoes that are going to be taking place within a short window, also foretold, 1940s. There is NASA discoveries about other things in the solar system and in the greater universe published before NASA, verifiably. We have legal and scientific standard of proof, not only of space travel, but of time travel. Anybody can take this material in 15 minutes, defeat any legal or scientific challenge. This is all coming in us. We will have 2 civil wars in this country, foretold in 1981. The fall of the US dollar, foretold in 2006. Personally, I put up a video back then from a meeting I had with Meier where he described what's coming. The cashless society, all this stuff that's unfolding. And the flood of illegal migrants in Europe, foretold in the 40s. And then repeatedly saying a crazy woman in Germany would open the floodgates. And
we're definitely seeing that. We're seeing the negative effects of that. What do you think the big plan is for that? Why are they doing that? And I'm assuming this is from the dark forces.
Well, there are forces. There are a number of different. It's not necessarily, really like. It's really about there are various entities, people, terrestrial people who have groups and who have agendas for power and control, the WEF, the EU, all of these things. And some of them overlap, some of them don't. It's for domination and control. And we will, according to Meier in 1958, when he predicted the worldwide use of computers interconnected through an internet, that the people will be biochipped. And it's coming, started, and they will be controlled to the inch everywhere by these powerful forces. And going back to the 58, also, he foretold the flood throughout Europe of radical Islam, which is going to wreck Europe. And when the floodgates were opened there, they were opened here by the treasonous last US administration. 10 years ago, we already had 1,700 sleepers in this country. Can you imagine, with the millions of people that have been let in? So and these things are done deliberately by these powerful entities, political, financial, military, for control, because people think there's something you can really control about life other than learning how to live it and abide by the real universal principles that guide everything. And that's the core purpose of the Meier case. It's not about you. If
You want to ask a question to Michael?
Yeah, Michael, there's so much I could ask, and I do hope you'll come back for a longer discussion at some point, because there's so much I could ask. But well, where to begin? You mentioned you were on the SETI team, that is the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Now, based on what you've currently told us, there's a contradiction there, because SETI, well, I know about it. They look millions of light years away, but they're right here on the Earth with us. So they should look a bit closer to home, don't they?
Listen, I got to tell you the first part of that's a joke. And I put it in my bio because I really want people, like you're the first people to do it, to mention it. I engaged with SETI, and I started actually engaging with them about a dozen years ago. It's a tremendous hoax. They have been just funded for $200 million to continue their futile, dead-end, never-to-be-fulfilled search for extraterrestrial life. If extraterrestrials want to be found by us, as they've found Billy Meier for 83 years, don't we think they have the capacity to say, here we are? No, this is a great moneymaker. And when I started challenging him online, Bill Diamond, the president of SETI, said, Michael, you and I are on the same team. At least we'll be fighting. So I said, okay, great. Now I'm a former member of your team because I'm not an official member of SETI. It is such a roaring fraud. And we've sent them, I have a press release out years ago. We sent SETI all this information. All they've done is try to attack it because they would lose their funding. What would they for?
Do you know Carl Sagan, when he was very young, he was into UFOs. Then very suddenly, I think it was around 1965, he suddenly changed his mind, and that's when he wrote Life in Outer Space, which is the book that popularized SETI. I think I was published 66. I can't help wondering if someone had a word in his ear, slipped him some money, or maybe found something he some secrets he's keeping from his wife, that kind of thing,
Well, Carl Sagan, was certainly a brilliant man, made tons of contributions to things. I haven't read that book, but this is so easy because they're right now, even though the people that know about the Meier case are relatively very small numbers, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever. I know, apart from myself, I know other people that could take on any scientist at SETI and mop the floor with them because it's a fraud. And I guarantee you there are I've taken on scientists who won't respond now. I've done interviews with them, showed them. I have one guy coming apart at the seams in a video when suddenly I said, oh, that's all very nice. Thank you, Robin Hansen. What about this evidence? I start showing him the Meier stuff, and the guy starts literally twitching because these people, the scientists, have fallen into the same profiteering role now. We have a guy named Avi Loeb at Harvard. He writes books about extraterrestrials. I just contacted another guy. They won't respond because they can't. They have theories, and their theories are nonsensical. They're anti-scientific, but they get to write books about them and make some money. Great. I do my work voluntarily. I'm glad if somebody wants to buy some of Meier's books or anything like that, but I go, here I am. What can I do for you? Well, they don't want the help because they do not want this information. They don't want the scientific information. We have 60 examples Meier published before NASA. I've got 44 examples online in a test of information about COVID and the vax that Meier verifiably published before the CDC and the WHO because he was warned about this disease in the 40s. And where it really would come from, then they told him, this will come out of the association of two powerful men, the ruler of China, who will emerge, and his name will be Mao Zedong, and a humiliated American who had been powerful in office, and his name was, guys may or may not know it, Richard Nixon, a president kicked out as well. They started the bioengineering of this disease. It wasn't Bill Gates. Whatever Bill Gates and the crazy people are doing with vaccines and all, separate thing. And there'll be more of that because Meier was already they were describing the effects to women with stillborns and all in the 40s of what will be coming with this disease.
They're already pushing for new viruses in the news today. Even today, I've seen it, this brand new virus out of nowhere. Oh, what a coincidence, immediately after COVID.
You see, the National Cancer Institute, it was Nixon, when he set that up at Port Detrick in 1971, he doubled the budget of the biowarfare. It was under the guise of the National Cancer Institute.
Look, you have so many corrupt people in powerful positions. You know, we are just the people of the world. But if we learn how to live in harmony with the way life is really set up, and there's no gods floating around up there, it's a much bigger picture. And when we start to we have to, it's not a belief system. It's here's a study, figure it out. This is how the mind works. This is how consciousness works. This is how thinking works. This is how you can test everything in your own life. It's a challenge because everything we've been taught all along by the powers that be, there's a lot of very suspect information. And there is bioengineering of very harmful things coming. Meier spoke about it in 2017. There will be attempts at exterminations of whole groups. So it isn't all that it's, like a conspiracy theory. There is that exists.
There was a mention of something called the red meteor that I was reading about that I think scheduled, I say, supposedly coming between 2029 to 2036. And literally today on Sky News, I saw a report about this meteor or an asteroid, I think it is, that they said there's a 1 in 64 chance of it hitting us. And they said that is kind of an extinction level, kind of, pretty much close to it, I'd imagine. But they said that there's I think it's going to come in 2028 again.
2032,
6 or 2029 for Apophis. Was this about Apophis that you saw?
Yeah, I think it was probably the same thing you've spoken about, but they called it something else. But it was literally something that came up on Sky News today. This asteroid. Yeah, and 1 in 64 chances of it hitting the Earth. And this guy who was an astronomer was talking about it to Sky News about the fact that they've got to really start planning now how they're going to deal with this thing, whether they're going to knock it off course or something like that, 'cause they can't fire nukes at it or something,
I've got the details here. 2024 YR4. Yeah, it has a 1 in 53 chance of impacting on the 22nd of December 2032. And NASA and Elon Musk has said, they've got to send a rocket up there or something to the DART mission to deflect it, but they won't know in 2028. They won't know because that's when it disappears behind the sun, and they won't be able to see it till just beforehand. It's actually.
I was just going to say, 1981 is when Billy Meier first published information on Apophis. He had a couple of contacts. I illustrated and put it in a comic book online so people could read it. It's coming to a location not far from you, between the North Sea and the Black Sea. This thing is going to hit. And if it's not, and they told him, they said, don't try and blow it up with nukes. You deflect it by detonating a nuclear charge at an appropriate proximity that sends a shock wave and nudges it. And so NASA said, no, when we started publishing this stuff, my gosh, I mean, as soon as we found NASA discovered it in 2004, 23 years after Meier started publishing it. This is about our future survival. That's why this may be the first time you guys ever hear about it in your audience. And, if you want to do a real presentation at some point, help people out, let them decide for themselves. And I've got a blog, probably 2,500 articles by now about all this stuff. Just endless free information.
How can they come to your blog, Michael? What's the website address?
It's theyflyblog.com. Theyflyblog.com. And we answer questions. There's, if possible, it's a field day. You go and you start to find out what this man has already foretold that's occurred and what's coming. For instance, there's 5 volcanoes in Italy that are going to blow completely they were dormant in 48 when they predicted this. And I started to do research to find out if it could be so, because they said in 48, preceding these major eruptions, central Italy, 2016, there will be earthquakes in central Italy. It will be very powerful. This will be the signal that this stuff will start to. I looked it up. It said, you can find online, 2016, central Italy, the strongest earthquakes on record in Italy. How did they know that in 1948? Mm-hmm. How did they know that the WTC in America would be destroyed when they published it in 1987?
Mm.
Do you think Werner von Braun had access to this information because he, on his deathbed, he basically talked about first there'll be states there to be afraid of, and then they'll push kind of like terrorists, and then they'll push an asteroid, and then after that the final card would be the alien invasion or the fake alien invasion. Do you think there's any correlation with this?
Well, Werner von Braun was, by the way, was involved in the fake Apollo moon landing.
Yeah.
And Meier foretold that in 1958, along with the actual one that would be legit, that would follow that. So Werner von Braun, there was a woman named Carol Rosen in America, ROS, and she worked with him, and he told her about that stuff. Billy Meier, we put up a blog about the fake alien. I mean, we've got all this information that's preceded anybody's information, but because it's real, so 25 attempts on Meier's life in 40, 50 years, nobody's shooting at these other whistleblowers because it serves the agenda to get people chasing their tails, ooh, ah, aliens, non-humans. Meanwhile, he meets with human beings like us since he's a 5-year-old boy, and they basically scratch their heads. They say, human beings of Earth, hopelessly stupid.
Has he met any of the Greys or the reptilians or anything like that, or just the human?
The Greys are actually the androids, such as the ones that were found during the actual Roswell crash. That actually happened. There were about 7 or 8 other crashes. They were androids. They're not humans. And so the evil alien agenda was started really by our government in the 40s by President Roosevelt here, because when they started to find out that there were other beings in the universe, they did not want the people of Earth to find out that A, other beings exist, B, they're not out to get us, C, that if they were, our governments could do nothing about it. That's why all the phony hearings that continue to this day, the evil alien threat. 70 years? What are these people, incompetent? They can get to us from outer space, but in 70 years, they're just threatening us. They don't take over. They don't kill us.
Don't you think it's a lot more? I mean, this is my personal view. Don't you think it's a lot more insidious with that? So we talk about Illuminati, secret societies, Bohemian Groves, satanic cults. Even if we take the position that okay, these beings might not be here to overtly take over, if we've got people at higher levels calling in like dark entities, wouldn't it be fair to say that maybe dark entities do actually turn up and start causing trouble?
Here's the way it's kind of looked at in this material. Throughout the universe, there's light and dark, there's good and bad on planets and space. This is a vast universe teeming, not in our region, but teeming with life of all sorts of different forms. And powerful beings in the past have taken over here, have set up things. As a matter of fact, the last ones to do that were sent off planet in about 1978. They were humans. They were based under the Great Pyramid at Giza, which actually is 72,000 plus years of age. But we mystify things. I understand it because we don't want to just go, wait a minute, there's good and bad people. There are groups who have these agendas, but they're not immune from the laws of cause and effect. They don't have everything going smoothly. The Illuminati per se is now a very impotent bunch of people. There are more powerful people. BlackRock in America.
These client list.
You got it. These are the people. They're not flawless. They make mistakes, and they're smaller in number, of course, than the rest of the population. But because we give them all this mystical, magical press, people then retract and feel they're powerless. And if people, as Meier said in this material, there's a player and people, extraterrestrials, if the people with Earth would learn how to think and would study the sea, they'd realize they can take.
This is it. We can defeat this. It's not indefeatable. It's just people need to wake up.
You've just go too far, and now there's a lot of chaos coming.
Yes.
The UK is going to have a lot of trouble. The House of Windsor will be no more at a certain point. This was published by Meier long ago. They described problems within the relationships and marriages, stuff, things that have happened since then. They can see this stuff because they're time travelers, and they don't they never say we think this or we theorize. There's no theories. They do say we don't know when they don't know. They say we don't know about that. We will or we won't look into it. There are things we know we can't speak about yet. There are things we could do, but we can't because the information would lead to technologies that your insane governments and secret services would use to create death-bringing weapons and wouldn't help your humankind. They have looked in, through all these wars that we have, some of the people that because Billy will meet with them, they will go, they looked into the Ukraine thing starting long ago, the Israeli thing. Some of the extraterrestrials have to go back to their world for their version of therapy after they see the way people on this world brutalize.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's mental.
Right. I think we better wrap this up now, everybody. But it's been, I mean, we've taken more of your time than you promised, but we're grateful for it. But thank you so much, Michael, for joining us.
My pleasure. Anytime. Set it up in advance. We can do a multimedia thing and you can start to see the whole deal. acelog.com. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks very much. Good day to you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Well, welcome back to part 2 of the Paranormal Peep Show. So there we were taking a chat with Michael Horn, who is the UFO writer, author, filmmaker, and I suppose you could say representative of Billy Meier, the contactee for the 1970s. I think he's now in his 80s, actually, this chap, and he's from the Swiss mountains, and he was having all these contacts from the age of 5, as Michael said. And so Preston, you've come across Michael Horn's work before, and that of also of the contactee Billy Meier. So what's your opinion of all that kind of thing?
Oh yeah, I've been following the Billy Meier case since it first started getting a lot of media attention. Gary Kinder wrote a book about his case, which is really what popularized it here in the United States. Of course, Wendell Stevens, Britton Lee Elders, Randolph Winters. There's quite a few people like Michael Horn who have taken a very, very close look at this case. And I've got his books, his contact notes, Billy Meier, as it is an interesting case. There's an enormous amount of evidence to support it. So I have to think that he's a genuine contactee, just given on the fact that there are so many outside witnesses to what he's seen. Not just 1 or 2 or 10 or 20. There's 50 or 100 who've been in his presence when UFOs have shown up. And he's got some really outstanding landing trace evidence. He did apparently get a piece of metal, which he obtained from the ETs and sent to Marcel Vogel, a scientist who studied it, found all kinds of unusual properties to it, got sound recording evidence, excellent photographs, of course, including moving films, which are really quite impressive. Well, yeah, I do think he's a genuine contactee. Not to say that there aren't problems with the case.
Yeah.
Well,
What did you see with the case?
Yeah, I mean, initially, it's very, very impressive. But some of the photographs are clearly not legitimate. They absolutely look like fakes, which is unfortunate because there's so many really good photographs that are very hard to debunk. And I don't think have ever been debunked. But there was some where he claimed he actually got a photograph of Semyazi, which turned out a game show host. And that's so these are just a few of a number of problems surrounding this case. And his photographs taken from outer space, apparently. I'm not sure they add up either. Some of the claims made by the ETs are a little bit hard to believe as well. As far as Michael Horn, I have to give credit to anyone who enters this field and agrees to study it and put their own reputation on the line and stand behind it.
Yeah, so I mean, there, Ben, we talked about Wendell Stevens, who was one of the people that first went into the case of Billy Meier, and he sort of gave it the thumbs up back in the 70s, didn't he? When he went in with the team and initially looked at it.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation because I've looked into this briefly. I'm not I'm not a major expert on it, but it's pretty clear there is something to it. But as Preston said, there's so much that is fabricated, and this is, of course, this is kind of the devil's bargain, because this happens all over the world in research into esoteric paranormal issues. Is that something real will happen, but it'll be sexed up with extra evidence. And indeed, a friend of mine, actually, Ross Hemsworth, actually was in this situation himself, because he used to do something called Ghost Detectives, which was a program. He presented a program on Channel 4, which is quite a big mainstream program, actually. And it had Chris French on it as the skeptic, and this lady called Mia, who's the medium, and they sort of investigated haunted houses. He also did
that. Yeah, it's a good show.
it's good. He also did something on BBC Two called it was called Halloween at the Tower, I think it was called.
I remember that.
It's kind of a real life ghost watch at the Tower of London on Halloween night. Yeah, and
Was that with the guy from the Avengers who hosted it?
Ross hosted it, but there was other people involved. It was like quite long. It's over 3 hours. It's like a vigil, a live broadcast. But I mean, he was actually offered a new show on Channel 5, I believe. And when he was at the program meeting presenting his plan, they were very positive. They were going to offer him a budget and a big team. It was going to be quite a good show. But then they said, Ross, we are going to have to deliver. And he said, what do you mean? He said, you have to find phenomena. And if you can't find real phenomena, basically, if you can't find any real phenomena, we're going to have to fake some stuff, which is long suspected to be a problem with most haunted. Although I know Yvette Fielding denies this. But now, this, of course, happens in real life. And I mean, people are put under pressure to create a phenomenon, but when they've encountered a phenomenon, they're put under pressure to make it believable, and they may be tempted into adding a few fabricated, contrived pieces of evidence to back it up. But of course, it doesn't back it up, because all that happens is that this then is picked up by the skeptics and used to discredit the entire case. And I think this is maybe where Preston, I don't know if you agree, but this is, I think, where Billy Meier has fallen afoul, and many other people have shared his fate.
I certainly wonder about it. And I would always advise, if you're having experiences, don't fake evidence. Why would you absolutely destroy your whole case? So it's really unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, there are absolutely problems with that case. And he's got quite a few detractors, I know. One of the things that really puzzles me about the case is that he claims, or the ETs basically told him that he's the only one who's having contact. And we know that that's not true. I mean, people all over the world are having contact. And that's an idea that I just don't holds water. But I absolutely do think he's a genuine contactee. It's really hard to ignore huge volumes of evidence that he has put forth. So it's one of the really more difficult cases to investigate, I think, because of this problem with it. I mean, here's an example, kind of a tangent. A gentleman in Belgium took a UFO photograph, and it got a lot of attention. It's a triangular photograph with bright lights.
Oh, yeah.
Belgium world. And he said, no, that's actually faked. Well, he recently came out and said, no, it's actually real, but I was paid to say it was faked. Oh, what are we supposed to do with that? I mean, it's become not useful evidence. Well, it's kind of where the Billy Meier case is at, because it may be perfectly legit, and I think probably is. The fact that it's been polluted to a degree makes it very difficult to put forth as a serious case.
Oh, you've actually undermines it, doesn't it?
I've dropped in a photo in chat. I found an alleged Billy Meier time travel photo of a pterodactyl dropping a fish, and then next to it there's something from 1960 by a Czech artist that's basically the same thing. So make your own minds up on that, folks.
This is unfortunately, this is a good example. And unfortunately, I mean, whenever people bring time travel into the situation, I always get suspicious, because time travel is actually not what it really appears to be in science fiction. For example, some science fiction actually deals with like causality paradoxes and parallel universes, such as it's a good film actually, Back to the Future, Robert Zemeckis film from the 80s. where a young man goes back he goes back to where his parents were children, and he almost disappears because his parents can't get back together. But when he goes back to the future, hence the title, he doesn't go back to the world he left. He goes back to a completely different world, one in which his father is now a successful author, when previously he was failed because he was a more confident man. Because Marty, the main character, he encourages his father to take on the school bully, which makes him a stronger, more confident man. So he becomes more successful. And this is the problem with time travel. You can't actually go back in time, literally, because you're going to something that doesn't exist. And hypothetically, if you could go there, you would change everything else that comes after it. So you therefore would not really exist yourself. That's the paradox.
Butterfly effect. Isn't it?
Yeah, it wouldn't actually work. So when I think maybe people confuse certain aspects of the UFO and contact phenomenon with time travel, because
Aliens do things with time, though, don't they? They kind of.
Yeah, they also lie. I mean, they are capable of doing things like weird things with, like, missing time and things like that. They take you and they bring you back, and it's like you think, like, blimey, where did the last 4 hours go? Things like that. But they also lie. I mean, aliens, as Carla Turner actually found, not Carla, what's her name? Dr. Carla. She found out that how they are kind of tricksters. They make things up, and they
I mean, an example of that, Ben, is before kind of space technology and probes and things, the aliens used to say, oh, we're from Mars and we're from Venus, and then we'd send probes there, and then suddenly, oh no, we're not from Mars and Venus, we're from Alpha Centauri and the Orion belt. And if we manage to get probes out there, they'll say, oh, we're not from there, we're from some other galaxy. So you're right. Why do you think they do that?
It's actually messing with our heads in some way. I mean, some of them are, for some reason. This doesn't count to all.
Well, I think there's also the problem that there's a lot of disinformation in this field, and that a number of these cases aren't true.
Right.
People who are so-called experiencers aren't experiencers. Some researchers aren't actual researchers. They're inserting completely false information, painting a narrative about ETs that's simply not true. I had to really step back and rely on my cases that I personally investigated to get an accurate view, because the media was not portraying this at all correctly. I do think ETs can do things with time. They pull people out of the time stream. They might have an experience that's 2-3 hours long, even a couple of days or longer, come back only minutes have passed. There's something going on there that they can do with time that we don't fully understand, and don't think that there's any good evidence that they're us from the future, which has been asserted by a number of contactees. I'll put that in quotes again. I think we really do have to take a good hard look at the fact that this is a subject that is being covered up brutally, viciously, with an enormous amount of time, money, and effort, the parts of people who don't want us to know the truth and are steering a fear narrative on this subject. So I think humans are the ones who are much more guilty of lying, deception, and mass murder, and all the horrible things that we sort of place onto the ETs, which I think is more, us placing our own cultural values on something we don't understand or fear, rather than what's actually happening here.
When you say that some contactees are for disinformation, is so they are putting out false information about the UFO or ET phenomenon into the public arena for a purpose. Is that what you're saying?
100%. It might be unintentional. It might be just the fact that they're sort of viewing through the lens of their own belief system or pushing an agenda. Now we'll name, David Jacobs, because he says flat out he does not think contact is good for people. I've talked to people who were in his book. He said, my story was not accurately portrayed. I did not fear it. It was actually a benevolent experience for me. And I'm not happy how he wrote about it. Well, this is not something I don't think he's doing intentionally, but it's just the way, he's writing it.
Isn't that the same with the Travis Walton case, when it was portrayed as these evil demonic aliens, but actually it wasn't quite
That film, Fire in the Sky. Yeah. If you read the book, it's
initially was quite frightened and interpreted it as a negative experience, but decided no, he thinks they probably saved his life.
Yeah, that's what I
It's
heard.
interesting. That is a pattern I see with many contactees who initially will interpret their experiences quite negatively with a lot of fear, dealing with a lot of trauma, and then keep having encounters and realize, okay, they're not here to hurt me. They've healed me. I've had a spiritual awakening as a result of this. Learned a lot of things. Most people, I'm going to say 85 to 90% of the people I've interviewed fit that pattern. It's initially scary, but ultimately they wouldn't trade it for anything. We're very glad to have had these experiences.
Interesting. So, Preston, what would you say the percentages of positive experiences, negative that turned into positive, or just negative? How would you split that down roughly?
I would say there's maybe 1 in 20 people I've interviewed feel like they wish this never happened to them.
Mhm.
And I ask them, well, why do you think, why? What is this so negative for you? And almost always it's because of the fear surrounding their encounters and the feeling of lack of control. There's a guy from England called Barry, that's not his real name, says he really wished it never happened to him. But he does admit he's gotten wonderful things out of it. He's a very proficient astral traveler. There's an enormous amount of OBEs, out-of-body experiences, a lot of psychic experiences. But just says it scares the daylights out of him each time these guys show up. This is usually what causes people to interpret it as a negative experience. It's only remember the bad parts. They have missing time. The only thing they remember is being on that table and fighting for their lives. And likely they've had much more extensive experience that they're not fully recalling. They don't want to. They're afraid. That's people who, I never hear people describing what I would call outright torture or sadistic behavior. I just don't get these kinds of cases. And I really question some that are out there because I think a good number of them are what we would call MILABs, military abductions, not ETs, faked abductions.
I mean, on the subject of the Fire in the Sky movie, now if you read the book or you watch the more recent documentary called Travis, you get the real story based on Travis's own testimony. The Fire in the Sky movie is accurate apart from the actual contact experience, because if the contact, I mean, this was totally against what Travis said, but I don't think there's anything necessarily nefarious in terms of this film, but they needed to turn into a kind of a horror movie. And indeed, if you see the abduction sequence of that film, it is indeed a horror movie. It's terrifying. Which of course, which is not what actually happened to Travis, and indeed the documentary said so. And in that situation, I think it was more to do with the producers, the studio's desire to produce a movie with a certain atmosphere for the audience. But I mean, in terms of the film Independence Day, which is a more recent film by Roland Emmerich, it's an appalling movie. It's really bad, but it's worth watching just to spot the kind of messages that's been given out. There's Randy Quaid's character who very bravely sacrifices himself at the end in this very implausible attack on the alien mothership in his plane. He's a contactee. He has had contact with the aliens, and as a result of this, it's damaged him so much. He's become an alcoholic. He's lost his job, and his friends tease him about it. And of course, along with many other messages in that movies, I can't help wondering if it is an attempt to. This takes us back to what we said before about the possibility that the government might actually use the threat from extraterrestrials, even if it's whether it's real or not, or they will fabricate evidence that says they're bad. We lied to you, but we wanted to protect you. They're bad aliens out there. We need to come together as a one world government, just for a little while, just so we can solve this problem. And of course, like the contact experience will be a part of that.
Just to flatten the curve.
Flare in the Sky was actually a really good movie, except for that onboard segment, which set back UFO research decades. I can't tell you how many people came up and was like, "Is that what happens?" Like, no. And I know Tracy Torme fought hard to keep it accurate, but the guys, who were funding the movie ultimately said no. So Now from what I understand, they're redoing the Betty and Barney Hill story, which was also a pretty good movie, very low budget, but I thought well done.
Oh, that was the UFO incident. That was good. The one with James Earl Jones as Barney. That was a good one. I don't know what the new one's going to be like. I think it's going to be very, very political from what I gather, and it's going to stress the racism.
With Kathleen Martin, who is really the go-to person. She's the niece of Betty Hill. They have not contacted her whatsoever, so I'm not hopeful.
Yeah. She actually put a statement out saying she's not happy with the way that this she's a bit dubious about what's going to happen with this new movie. I mean, I'll watch it, but I'm not hopeful for. I think it's going to be.
It was really not one movie out there that's portrayed this fully accurately. The TV miniseries based on Bud Hopkins' book Intruders was fairly well done, a little fear-based, but largely accurate. I liked Wavelength. It's a sleeper of a movie. It's also very hard to find, but worth watching.
Have you seen the Manhattan Abduction? I know Linda Napolitano, the lady. She's very unhappy with how she was portrayed, and it's a documentary in which she appears. But
yeah, rightly.
So there was film her in a kitchen in a dressing gown, like she's some sort of old. She's just this old sort of biddy living alone. She actually has a husband and she has a big family, and indeed they're interviewed in the program, but they always portray her in a particular. They try to fit her into a stereotype, which is quite insulting, I think. Whereas the skeptic lady is always portrayed like sitting at a desk in an office, nicely dressed and things like that. So I wasn't
Rainy. I had a few email interactions with her where she attacked my research baselessly, actually, because I mean, I don't want to get into name calling or anything, but no, that was not an accurate portrayal of the Manhattan abduction, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I don't blame Linda Napolitano one bit, because this was very biased.
I bet Peter Robbins is not happy with it because he was interviewed considerably in that, but I suspect he's not gonna like it.
Yeah, well, here's an opportunity for filmmakers out there.
Yeah, it just doesn't
accurate way.
I mean, I'm hoping in this new kind of post 2017 new ufology era, we might actually get accurate fictionalizations which we've never had before.
Getting back to the Michael Horn interview that we were talking about predictions, and one of the things that the aliens said to Billy Meier was the fact that there's going to be changes on the Earth, a great big meteor or something, or comet, I can't remember what he said now, striking the Earth. And I said, oh, that's just come up, actually. Someone's discovered this meteorite. Ben, you got some information on that, haven't you?
Yes, I mean, as you know, I have my own show similar to the Paranormal Peep Show. It's called the Humanoid Show. And I have a space weather slot every week where I cover things like this. And indeed, there's been a huge amount of news about something called 2024 YR4. Now, this is an asteroid. It's an Apollo-type asteroid, which means it crosses the Earth's orbit quite regularly. It's in a similar orbit to the Earth. And it was discovered last year, and there is a small chance that it will impact the Earth on the 22nd of December 2032. Which is only 8 years away. It's something we need to be concerned about. Now, there's been a lot of, I think, overhyped news stories about this, describing it as an end of the world scenario. It's not. This object is between 130 and 330 feet in diameter. If it impacts, it will not destroy the world. However, in the local area in which it impacts, it could have a devastating effect because it will explode. If it hits it will explode in the upper atmosphere and break apart with enormous force in the upper atmosphere. If it does impact, this will release an explosion roughly 8 to 12 megatons, which is much bigger than most nuclear weapons. And it's likely. They say it's likely to impact. There's somewhere around the equator of the Earth, from an area from basically the Atlantic Ocean. Across Asia. Now, if its impacts over the Atlantic Ocean, or say North Africa, the Sahara Desert, these are uninhabited areas. It probably will not do. You probably won't harm anyone. However, this also includes the plains of India. If it impacts there, it's going to impact on one of the most densely populated areas of the world. As supposing it explodes above Delhi or Calcutta or Benares or somewhere like that, you could see a horrific disaster. Now, what's gonna happen is we won't know for certain until 2028, because that's when it comes round to its next orbit, or next encounter of the Earth. Then we'll have a closer idea about where it's going to be. Now, what NASA are planning to do is they're planning to use what they call the DART mission. You may have seen it tested a couple of years ago. They actually did. And it's a way of knocking an asteroid slightly off course. They don't have to knock it off by much, just like a fraction of a degree second of the arc, and it will miss the Earth if they know it's going to impact. So we won't know for a few years whether this is going to be an actually impacting asteroid or whether it will just pass very close. If it is going to be impacting, there are ways of knocking it off course. But at the moment, we're not sure. But I mean, this is a perennial danger, which is part of living in this solar system. These things do impact. In fact, small asteroids impact all the time.
Now, it reminds me of the Tunguska event of 1908 in central Siberia, where this great big explosion ripped through that area. Fortunately, possibly only killing about 3 people out the masses it could have killed. And had it struck 4 hours later, it would have detonated over Central Europe, annihilating London and Western Europe, possibly. Now, Billy Meier's contacts said that rather than it being a meteorite or an asteroid or a comet, which the general hypothesis is that's what it was, exploding 5 miles above the surface of the Earth, they said in that particular instance it was a spaceship launching off from the Earth, and it had to self-detonate because it was in trouble or something, and it obliterated itself with a nuclear explosion. I'm a bit dubious about that explanation given by the Billy Meier space people, to be honest. Have you heard of that one, Preston?
I have, and I'm certainly not an expert in the Tunguska incident. I do find it fascinating. It's a lot of contactee cases do involve predictions. Sure, fascinating. It's my understanding that some of Billy Meier's predictions have come true, some haven't, but it's not that unusual. I mean, I interviewed a gentleman who is a very good witness, a Navy medic, who had an encounter with praying mantis type ETs, who gave a long list of predictions, a number of which did come true, and almost exclusively involved what we would call disasters of some kind. They told him that since we started exploding nuclear weapons, we created what they called a countdown clock. All these hurricanes and landslides and earthquakes and bad weather phenomena become a real problem in our future, which is certainly something we've seen. I've talked to a lot of contactees who've gotten this sort of message. Usually they're messages and warnings as opposed to hard predictions, but it's certainly a theme that's very prominent in contactee cases.
We hear it all the time, don't we? That they say, even like the little, Preston, you said you've covered school playground encounters. The Ariel school in Rua, the kids said they said that we've got to be good to the environment, otherwise we're going to damage the Earth. And now it's interesting. When it comes to the Tunguska incident, there's a book actually called "The Fire Came By," and I can't remember the author's name, which addresses this and the fact that I mean, I'm not like you, Neil. I'm not completely sold on this idea, but fragments of this have never been discovered. There was a huge explosion. They were estimated up to 16 to 30 megatons above Siberia in that year. And unfortunately, study didn't begin until many years later, because this happened just after the 1905 revolution, which was a massive upheaval in Russia. If you've seen Dr. Zhivago, you'll know all about that. Then in 1917, this was followed by the Bolshevik Revolution, which created the Soviet Union. And so literally it was a few years after that, the first expedition actually went there, led by a guy called Leonid Kulik. Mm-hmm. And Kulik himself actually mentioned when he got there, and it's an extremely difficult place to get to. Even today, it's difficult to get to. In those days, it was like you have to trek through this swamp, through this forest. It was like really, really difficult to get to. He said that he believed that something would have impacted and left an impact crater, or at least there would be fragments that had landed, like you saw with Chelyabinsk, another Russian case, more recent. There were fragments. Now, no fragments of the Tunguska object have ever been discovered. despite now, this could be because I said it's the difficulty, the logistic and practical difficulty of doing the study of obtaining these specimens, or it could be that it was something else and not an asteroid.
Or perhaps it was covered up. If they did find stuff that would affect how the way we believe this phenomena to be actual pieces, are they going to tell us?
No.
Certainly not getting any.
There was other expeditions featuring future cosmonauts that were very keen to go out with them, and they'd read various science fiction books talking about space people. And so that had fired up their enthusiasm because they thought that maybe someone had a theory in one of the science fiction novels that the Tunguska event was a spacecraft or something. So there was actually expeditions that went out there after Kulik in the 1960s, and they got to the perimeter, and one guy found metal fragments, and he was convinced it was part of the spaceship. But it was only later on they found it was part of an old tractor or something. So you've got to be careful of what claims you make.
This isotopic ratio, that's how they can tell. When Dr. Irina Scott talked about this, about how they can tell from a material whether it comes from Earth or not by its isotopic ratio. Yeah. But I mean, what happened was there was a major UFO incident at the time just before the explosion. And it was reported in several newspapers, actually, in the area. Even though it was a remote area, there were several settlements, small villages, small towns across Siberia. Rasputin grew up in one of these communities. It's a very, very strange culture. But they reported seeing an object change direction, a glowing object that was heading north towards the Tunguska area, and it changed direction. Now, a meteor wouldn't do that, and if it was impacting.
There was also, talking of sort of ET predictions, there was a case of, I think this is in northern Italy in the Dolomite Mountains, and I can't remember if I saw it on Preston's channel or another channel, but I covered it in my source anyway. This guy's, he was actually a former aircraft engineer, but he was driving, I think this is in the 60s, he was driving through the Dolomite Mountains along this road that he knew very, very well. It was thick fog, and he was heading to a hotel to stay where his aunt ran a hotel in the area, and he's going to stay there the night. But either he broke down or the fog was too thick to carry on. I'm not quite sure which. But basically, he stopped there and was going to sleep overnight in his car. But he noticed this light glowing down the bank. So he went to investigate. And as he got there, he found this flying saucer. And on the outside of it was, again, a creature, a robot, a four-armed robot with 2 legs or 3 legs, appearing to do something to the outside of the craft, like twiddle it or rotate it or do something to it. And there was 2 people in like the domed cockpit, and one of them came down like a ladder or a beam or something and spoke to me. He had a sort of spacesuit on or something like that, but he was talking to him. And one of the interesting things he did say was that on his planet where he came from is that they didn't do any work. They had no kind of work like we would have here, but menial tasks were done by ape-like creatures. And I thought that was interesting, as I was talking about Bigfoot earlier on. I wonder if they could be like a version of Bigfoot on this particular planet. And then later on, he said, this alien, that there'll be shifts in the magnetic poles of the Earth, and at some point after that there'll be a great rift that opens up between, I can't remember where, a split all the way across Europe where the Earth will open up or something, and most of that will disappear into the sea or something like that, which I thought was interesting. And this guy actually wanted to go with the aliens. He says, please take me with you, and they said, no, we can't do that.
Like Walter Rizzi is the guy.
That's the guy. That's it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Can you explain a bit more about the prediction at the end, about the Earth cataclysmic prediction? I can't remember if I got that right or not.
I think they said that the Earth, I'm trying to remember it as well. But I think what they told him was that the Earth will actually tilt on its axis, which will cause straight floods and end up being a largely existential event for humanity, but pockets will survive. It's an interesting prediction because that does come up in a number of cases.
Yeah.
He had a nice long conversation with these guys, which was really fascinating. I remember he asked them about God.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a God? And they said, well, everything around us, that is God. Which I thought was an interesting way of looking at it. Kind of, not many people get a lot of communication that is that extensive. Thought it was an interesting case and had landing traces as well. So
All right, that's
just
interesting.
relying on his own anecdotal testimony.
Ben, were you at High Elms for the Simon Parks talk?
Which one?
The last one back in July, I think it was June, July.
No, I was actually, unfortunately, I went to had to go to another event that weekend, which I'd already booked. But
Okay.
it's very sad that those two events clashed.
Yeah. So basically, going back to kind of like the strange metals and the alien metals, I actually won a paperclip. So
Really?
this paperclip is made out of nitinol. And nitinol is a new kind of the military have been working on it. It's a metal where you can bend it into any shape, like this. And if I had a bowl of hot water, you could put it in and it will spring back to exactly the shape that it was originally.
Sounds like Roswell metal to me.
This is why it was in a Simon Parks talk. So
Cool.
he was talking about alien technology that has been picked up by humans and used by humans. So things like fiber optics, lasers, things like that. And then he brought up this nitinol, which is this new metal that the military have been using. Is the reason the military are interested are its self-healing properties. So for instance, if a tank gets hit or like a bullet goes into metal, it can kind of self-heal, kind of thing. So anyway, I answered a question. I forgot what the question was, but I won this little paperclip. So it may not look very much, but
Alien stationery.
but if I had a bowl of hot water, I probably haven't got time at the moment. I could drop that in, and it will spring back to shape. And what I'll do is I will drop this into chat. Anyone that's interested, go on to, I think it's Reddit, and search for "this paperclip is made out of nitinol and can be programmed to a certain shape. When it has been deformed, it can go back to its programmed shape by heating up the metal," and the video shows you how it's done. Very interesting.
Oh, well, do try it yourself and let us know what results you get.
Yeah.
Now, as for the what I didn't hear Simon's talk, but what he's described is very much the content of Colonel Philip Corso's "The Day After Roswell," which unfortunately didn't make a lot of sense to me. For example, when it comes to fiber optic and lasers, we know how there's like a paper trail of inventors and people like that who've actually, and developers and people like that who have actually created these things. That being said, when it comes to more generally, when it comes to secret science done on the remains of craft and bodies, yes, I'm sure there are some things that do come from that. Maybe this nitinol does. I know that Anthony Brigadier managed to get a Freedom of Information Act request from Susan Goff, of all people, which was very heavily redacted. Only 13 of the 140 odd pages of this were published, but they do mention this material. And again, it seems to have popped up out of nowhere. Maybe it was, maybe it actually was that very, very thing. So maybe some of that secret science has actually been seeded into the industrial world and has been allowed to enter public use. So I don't completely write the whole thing off.
I'm gonna do it. You guys keep chatting. I'm gonna do a live.
Please do.
I'm gonna
Please
hit
do. You've got an exclusive.
Whole black budget has gone into making a paperclip for us to use. That's amazing.
You've really got an exclusive here. Let's see if it works.
So, talking of alien technology, people have tried to bring things back off of craft, haven't they, Preston, to try and prove their experiences?
Oh yeah, almost always unsuccessfully, I should say. I know the very first case that got any publicity at all, Antonio Villas-Boas,
Right.
tried to grab a sort of clock-looking object, which immediately ended his onboard experience. They pushed him over, grabbed it, took it away from him, and quickly escorted him off the craft.
Wow.
It's like he's only nicking the stuff from us.
Yeah.
That case is most famous because he was actually he was given some kind of strange gas. He had to inhale some sort of strange gas that obviously messed with his mind, because he then saw a creature that looked like a human woman. Not exactly. Obviously, it wasn't. It had several. It was
Sort of intimate relations, as I remember.
he recalled having
something.
Yeah, he recalls having sex with this creature very eagerly, which you'd think would be unthinkable in that situation.
That's why he wanted the clock. He wanted to time himself. It is.
But that's interesting you bring that up, Preston. I mean, we kind of changed. I don't want to change the subject if you have more to say on the clock and materials, but the reproductive elements of encounters.
Yeah, there's a number of people who've reported essentially that same sequence of events. It's not super common, but it absolutely does come up. I've interviewed a few people myself who've, describe that sort of thing, which fits in with the narrative that a lot of people report having genetic material removed, whether you're male or female.
Your sperm extracted, overtaken from, and indeed, there's sexual encounters. In the case of Antonia Villas-Boas, I actually know a lady who has written extensively on this, Anne Andrews. She has a son who does not live in our world. He lives in the alien world, and she's met it. She's encountered. Yeah, Jason is the son who was planted into her. Yeah, she has another son that was taken from her while she's pregnant with him, and he's called Nathan. He's living in the world of the aliens. And this is something that I didn't discuss it with her. I just read it in a book because it upsets her so much to talk about it. You can't really talk about it, but
right.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I'm going to bend it as much as I can. Okay.
Here we go.
Here we go. Now I know some people like that's the paperclip. You can all see that completely, mate. Some people might think I'm hiding like a different paperclip, but I'm not.
I trust you. We trust you.
And that's not water, is it?
There's a cup of water. I can't show you that it's empty because it will pour over the keyboard. But you just have to take my word for it. This is the paperclip. This is hot water. Okay.
How long does it take to go back?
Instantly. Okay, I'm going to try. Keep the plug in shot.
This
is the paperclip that's just come out.
No way.
Andy, really?
Yep, really. Now I can't tip up the cup to show you that there's not two paperclips because it will spill all over the thing. But it is instant. I wonder if there's a way of doing it.
So for those listening on audio, Andy's just placed this bent paperclip into a cup of hot water.
Do you know how I might be able to do, guys? How I might switch cameras if I've got my remote camera. Right, wasn't that overhead?
Extraordinary. I mean, that's
Be able to do this.
right. I'm obviously a skeptic. Will say that Andy didn't have two paperclips. I mean, I trust Andy. I've known him a long time.
Very metal, is that the term?
Nitinol. I'm going to switch cameras. I don't know if this is going to work.
I'd like to see this actually happen. I'd like to see it actually changing.
There must be examples on YouTube.
All right. Go. I can do it. Let's have it.
Here we go. Oh, blimey, look.
Right. Okay. This is the. I'm going to need.
Bend it, haven't you?
Yeah. I'm going to need two hands to bend it.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
This is his David Copperfield moment.
Yeah. Right. So skeptics, have a look at this. So this is. You'd agree that's completely bent.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Watch.
That's incredible.
That is called nitinol.
Oh my God, that's real.
Nitinol. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So this is what I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do it again so you can watch me. I'm going to.
That's
because of Simon Parkes, like he gets so much grief off the skeptics and people.
Yeah,
like he really does. But I mean, they'll say, "Oh, it's all fake," but he fakes everything. But
okay.
My God,
so
you didn't let him know we've done this.
Yeah. So you can see completely bent. Okay,
Yes.
completely bent. Now, if this was a tank or something, and it got hit by a bullet, a hot bullet or something, presumably it could.
Well, that goes instantaneously.
Revolution outdoors was great.
This is what Jesse Marcel Jr. witnessed when he was shown the sheet of metal by his father in 1947.
I mean, how much does a paperclip cost?
I won it.
$10 million.
You can actually get it off eBay for about $5.
Nice and old paperclip.
About $5. I'm going to find a link and I'm going to drop. Neil, perhaps you could put this link in the comment section or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
But they're not that much. And
So is it close to like aluminium or something? This metal?
it's they're apparently they've been working on it. Simon says it's using alien technology or derived from alien technology, but this is human metal. That they've kind of like used alien technology to create it, kind of thing. So again, with things like lasers and fiber optics, it's like the concept apparently comes from the aliens. Humans have taken it, back engineered it, and created this new thing from it.
So I can imagine all these aliens landing in their flying saucers saying, "Hey, everybody, we come in peace and we've got a box full of paperclips for you."
They're internationally stationary deliverers. They're the intergalactic equivalent of.
I found one for £3 off eBay. Okay.
If they can make your car out of that, no more dents in your car.
I mean, yeah, but this is really extraordinary.
It is.
It's really, I mean, because
Have you ever heard of that, Preston? This metal that bends? I mean, obviously we've heard about this mentioned in the Roswell scenario, but have you ever heard of that in this SNAS? Just trying to think now.
In terms of them successfully reverse engineering it, no, I have not personally.
Does just thoughts on that demonstration by Andy? Quite amazing, huh?
Oh, yeah.
that was one of the most remarkable things I've seen, Andy. Yeah,
that's
thanks for doing that live on the show and giving Neil this exclusive.
So I know the skeptics will say, "Oh, he's got 2 paperclips." I'm not a magician. I'm not an illusionist. If I say something, it's real. So,
And we've just seen you actually doing it. He doesn't have 2 paperclips.
Does that have a limited lifespan? So it can only do it so many times before it wears out.
maybe I'll just keep on doing it throughout the show and see. But I was
It's
just
an interesting experiment to see if the effect actually does wear off, because
it will wear off with the decrease in temperature of the water. So when it goes back to room temperature, each time you do it, it will get slower and slower to do.
it has to be
Then-
hot water.
Yeah, hot water. If for some reason it reacts to heat only.
What happens if you put it in the freezer? You can't bend it at all?
He's going to spend the rest of the show in the freezer now.
But that is remarkable. No, obviously, like these metamaterials and things like that, quasi crystals you keep hearing about. They're obviously like these new smart materials you keep hearing about. The question is, were they their origins? It's interesting to look into whether their origins really were from the study of extraterrestrial objects, artifacts. Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't be really surprised. I mean, we do this. We do reverse engineer things which we find. I mean, we've always done this. I mean, for example, when our ancestors first learned to work metals, we probably one community developed this skill, and then others would visit them, and they learn it, and they go back and they try it themselves, and these ideas would spread very, very quickly until eventually the whole human population was doing it. And technology does like this. In fact, a lot of the world's technology that was invented here in Europe is now being used worldwide. I mean, wherever you go in the world, you will find cars, you will find electricity. These things were developed by scientists, mostly on the European continent, but they've been adopted by people across the world. Indeed, we ourselves here in Europe have adopted things that have been developed elsewhere. We learn from each other, and indeed, on a cosmic scale, why shouldn't we do the same? Now, I'm not saying the aliens have willingly given us technology. Maybe some of them have, or maybe we have obtained it from their own accidental losses, their own craft being coming down to grief on the Earth's surface. So or maybe some people stealing things during abductions, like Antonio tried to in Brazil.
Now this is interesting, guys. The water temperature is decreasing, and it's slowing the time for it to get back. So I'm going to show you guys again, like the slow motion version of it, which also
I didn't realise we're turning ourselves into a science show.
it's like a Millie Paul Daniels show. Okay. So this is just as fascinating, actually. So again, here we are. Okay, I'm going to drop it in.
Yeah, it's still forming back and returning to its original shape. It's taking longer. You're right.
Yeah,
it's taking longer to do it, and it hasn't. Right. Oh, it is going. I thought the other.
it
goes slowly going, but in cooler water, it's not working so well.
So when it's fashioned into a particular shape, I mean, if you had that same metal and you had it shaped like a fork, say a dinner fork, it has to kind of remember its shape.
Doesn't how?
Yeah.
How?
How does it remember that it's a paperclip?
How is it doing this? I don't because you're right. It's the idea is that it is a program metal, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
I don't know how it would remember because it's quite a specific shape.
You need
That's
to
a-
write to a scientist and send some example, but don't use that paperclip with the attachments because you'll do that. Never get it back.
Yeah, you see, because yes, some materials are very flexible. For example, if you make a rubber version of that, wood, if you made something like that, a rubber, of course it would. The moment you compress, you warp it, it would just return to its original shape because it has that flexibility.
What if it's magnetic?
But I mean, it doesn't make any difference in the case of rubber whether it's in hot water or cold water or in the air.
Completely non-magnetic.
Right, so it's not like steel. It's not just like steel. It's
What if it conducts electricity or something? You know.
I can test that actually.
So, in a minute, I'd like to talk about a few contact cases before we close the show, Preston. So if you've got any particular favourite contact cases, have a think whilst Andy's just getting his little. It's
Oh yeah, I mean, I've got many favorite cases. It's very hard to choose. I did interview a gentleman for my fairly recent book, Humanoids and High Strangeness,
yeah,
who had an onboard experience as a young boy, which he didn't remember about the use of hypnosis. But it turned out his mom was with him during this onboard experience, and she had no memory of it either. He had gone to a hypnotist that's quit smoking. And this is what came out. And he was going to hypnosis because he had a problem with insomnia. These experiences came out and absolutely corroborated each other. His experience occurred at age 7. Turned out she had an experience at age 7. So did her parent, and so did his kid. So it's 4 generations who had encounters, all beginning at age 7 and continuing.
wow. Was that with grey beans? Was it or
Yes, it was. Yep, great type ETs. Yep.
right? Any is it conductive of electricity, Andy? That
It is indeed. Yeah, it is conductive.
interesting.
I'm going to drop a link. There's an eBay link there, but people can just search for it. Literally Amazon, eBay, wherever. Look up Paperclip Nitinol, spelt Nitinol. Nitinol.
Everyone's going to be buying it now. Go for it. Yeah. Now there was a case I sent to you, Preston, recently, which was you said you'd got, which was a very interesting case from like the 1800s, and it was actually reported to Newfoundland many years later, like 30 or 40 years later, and it was the guy's grandfather that had a case of him and his brothers were working on a farm somewhere. I forget where it was, and the dogs were barking at something. So they went to investigate what they were barking at, and they looked over a wall on their property, and it was this small green man. He seemed to be wearing a kind of wraparound hat or something, but his arms were hanging down. He only appeared to be a couple of feet high, but he was sitting there looking at something. And then the dogs just went for him, and they ripped this, we'll call it alien, to shreds, absolutely pulverized it. These 3 dogs pulled the whole thing apart. But the alien didn't even scream in pain or something, you know, and they crunched its bones and all sorts of things. And so then the guy just thought, oh, okay. So they left it and went back to work. Then they thought they go and check on it, and there's all the blood and guts there still there. But they went back there the next day, and there wasn't a mess at all anywhere. There's no traces of blood, no intestines, no body, no bits of bone. Very strange case, and that was like the grandfather kind of spoke to his grandson about it many years later, and it wasn't something they really talked about, but he had to be really encouraged to talk about it before he died. Do you recall that case?
I do, yeah. You sent me the link and I took a look at it. I did find it very interesting. It is a multiple witness case. To me, that always raises the level of credibility. It's not just one person saying this, although it is pretty much solely eyewitness testimony. Quite unusual. I do know of a case almost identical to it, which occurred much later in, 1970 something, North Carolina. A farmer whose dog started barking furiously, And he went running to see what the dog was barking at. And as soon as he arrived, this dog attacked this, what we would call a gray ET, and mangled it up, with the guy so badly that he basically fled and stayed in a hotel that night. Couldn't even stay in his home, and went back the next day and again found no trace of it. But essentially the same description of what happened. Really unusual. I mean, again, in his case, he didn't see a UFO, but certainly was much more akin to a typical gray ET. Whereas this one, which occurred in 1913 or 14, I believe, that you described which is in Texas, would be what we would call, a little person, or an elf, or a fairy, or what have you, which sounds crazy, but are present in pretty much all cultures across this planet and are very well authenticated, and not usually, connected directly to a craft as we would think of it.
So they're just there without any kind of presence of getting there. No one's aware of how they got there. Certainly they know how they've gone.
I'm wearing a little hat, by the way, which was kind of an interesting detail.
Yeah, a little sun hat. Interesting, the dogs didn't come off that bad. I mean, you would have thought if they're biting into some sort of alien flesh or something, with blood getting into their mouth, they might come up with some sort of weird infection or something, but they seem to fare well through it and survive by all accounts.
Physically, emotionally, from what I remember in the case, they were pretty upset and stuck close to their owners. It was kind of an interesting detail. That does turn up in a number of UFO cases where animals are quite unnerved by the encounter.
Yeah, there was a case in Wales, that was written about in the Welsh Triangle book, which includes the Broadhaven school incident, which is very similar to the Royal Zimbabwe one. This is from 1977, where the dog went missing, and this is a time when there was a flying saucer over a road, which was near someone's house. Then the dogs were barking at it. One of them went missing and came back in the morning, and was never the same again. Would hardly go out without the owner there, and was total personality change of this dog. And in my view, the dog had experienced an abduction, which had frightened him. And these things do have an effect in that sense.
I wrote a whole chapter about that in my Not From Here series. I've just put out volume 5, or put a chapter on aliens took my dog. There's a lot of cases. It is a surprisingly large number.
Would you say they have an interest in us? So why wouldn't they have an interest in other species as well?
Makes perfect sense.
Do they return the dogs afterwards, or?
Yes, in the vast majority of cases. And if they didn't, how would we know? Unless you've actually seen the dog being taken.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of missing people on this planet, which people are saying, maybe they're taken by UFOs. Well, maybe, but people go missing for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Really hard to speculate.
So what's the book you're working on now, Preston?
I'm always working on a couple. I'm working right now on the sequel to Symmetry, which is one of my more successful books about Dolly Saffron and her lifelong contacts with ETs, which is really the most extensive contact case I've ever had the privilege to investigate. So it's going to be an extraordinary book, I hope, continuing her experiences. But working on another about my own experiences with astral projection, which I got really interested in. I've had a lot of experiences with that. And other books on the paranormal, and of course, Humanoids, Encounters, I find super fascinating and maintain that is the cutting edge of UFO research.
Yeah.
Disclosure, I think, are really areas where we've got a lot of potential to change the way people think subject.
Well, I know that people look forward to your Friday night upload to YouTube of your videos of contact cases with humanoids and things, which I always thoroughly enjoy. So it's always worth watching Preston's channel for that. It's bizarre. I came across this video on YouTube the other day, and it's only been up there for about 8 days. It had like 150,000 hits, and it is, why are there clock towers on supermarkets? And you're thinking, why are people so interested in finding out clock towers on supermarkets? Here there's fascinating cases of UFOs and contacts of alien creatures, and this but people want to know about clocks on supermarket buildings. It's like just bizarre, you know.
It's very weird because it's right here in front of me on my YouTube feed. I've got it open in the
Ben, yes, watch you later.
Yeah, it's right here in front of me. Yeah, that's
Right. Well, thank you very much indeed, Preston, for that. So they can find out more about you at your website, prestondennett.com. Is that correct?
Essentially, it's prestondennett.weebly.com, but my name should be enough.
Okay, and they can also find you on YouTube, Preston Dennett as well, paranormal and UFO stories there. And he's obviously got a lot of books, so you can see those on Preston's website and also on Amazon as well. So thank you very much indeed for joining us once again, Preston, on the Paranormal Peep Show. And thank you, Andy, for the wonderful science demonstrations of Paperclips.
I could call it Operation Paperclip, maybe.
This is thinking, yeah, Operation Paperclips.
He's the Werner von Braun of the Paranormal Peep Show.
And thank you, Ben, for joining us once more as assistant host. And it's been a great chat and a great evening. So you're listening to us on the Paranormal Peep Show, and take care, and we'll see you next month. Good night.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.